Welcome to the Godzilla podcast. I am Joe.
I'm Drew.
And today we are going to be doing a commentary / podcast over Frankenstein, the Japanese version, right?
Yeah, so Frankenstein.
Frankenstein Conquers the World.
That would be the American title.
Yes. What is the Japanese title?
So directly translated Japanese title, Frankenstein versus the Subterranean Monster. And then, you know, slight tagline there, Frankenstein versus the subterranean monster Baragon. So let's just go Frankenstein versus Baragon. That would be your Japanese title.
All right, we can go with that for now. I'm not sure what the episode's going to be titled. I'll figure it out.
Something in between all those.
Anyway, Drew, it's been a while.
Too long, Joe. Too long.
It's been too long, yeah.
But Joe's been filming a movie.
I have been filming a movie. The movie has finished principal photography.
Are you just in the editing, post-production?
Currently, our editor is going to take the next couple of weeks and do an assembly cut.
Do you know the approximate length of the film? I'm curious.
About 22 minutes.
Oh, cool. All right.
Yeah.
So short film?
It's a long short film.
Yeah.
That's what you would call that.
That's like an episode of a TV show, basically. You know?
Yeah, basically. Yeah. Unfortunately, here's the thing with long shorts is that between the 20-minute and 45-minute area, or like the 1 hour area, really, it marks you out of a lot of festivals, like a lot of film festivals, because they're looking for shorts, like under 20 minutes, right? Yeah. Or they're looking for feature films. But the long short doesn't really have too many places it can go. Does that make sense? Like there's no novella.
You're in that weird in between.
There's no novella
length of film
for movies. There's no good place to show them. So, like, film festivals are good for short films, and feature films, of course, is something you can actually sell. Yeah. But the novella is a weird place. So we might have to look and see, like, certain requirements or whatever for our movie, whether or not we got to cut down a few minutes or what.
And that's Emmanuel's song.
That is Emmanuel's song. And, and some people who probably listen to this podcast help support our Indiegogo campaign for it. And
thank you.
Thank you very much. Drew.
Now we've officially dated this podcast.
Yeah, we have.
What you?
I'm ready to talk about this movie that I think is one of the better movies we've seen on this show.
Very unfortunate that the distribution is so there isn't currently distribution for it, really. Joe, the version that we're watching is the Sumo Gorilla. I hesitated the word.
It is from Sumo Gorilla, yes.
I hesitate the word. Pirated.
Ooh.
The pirated version. Joe, to view this film right now will cost you upwards of $50 for a DVD. And although this is a good monster film
definition DVD,
yeah, that's been out of print for at least 4 years, probably more. So what I was able to pull up about the distribution company that distributed this film back when they did, it was distributed in 2007. Yeah, in American region, so Region 1. It's a company called Media Blasters. The subdivision of said company was Tokyo Shock, and they've been out of business, that whole company, since 2012, officially-ish. That's what their Wikipedia page reads. They still have a web page and a physical location. I'm not sure where that's at. And I personally messaged them asking what the current state of their distribution for certain Godzilla films. They held, I'm not sure, the distribution rights to Godzilla vs. Gigan, Destroy All Monsters, actually, which we need to get to. Cool. We're building up to that. This film, which, not a Godzilla film, but ties in with the monsters and several other. And so that's why, because the company no longer distributes these, and there's really no one stateside that owns the distribution rights to these films. That's why, we're going to go into Atragon and a few other films. They're all upwards of $40. They're all currently in the $50-ish range for a legal copy.
For a legal copy. Well, when we get the Sumo Gorilla things, and we always think that they're like a burn copy of an import, but
that's what I thought I was getting.
This one's a local DVD it's Region 1.
It's the
But,
first
you know-
Sumo Gorilla DVD that I have purchased that has menus. The rest of them just contain the film. This is like exactly what you got from Tokyo Shock back when they released it.
Yeah, my opinions on getting pirated stuff is if it's not available legally, then you may as well just pirate it. But
Yeah, we were discussing this with Caleb pre the show.
$50 DVD.
And
Obviously, the distributors are not going to get any more money from it. So.
Schweiss, he called it a collector's thing at this point, but it's really not. It's just that no one owns the distribution to it. There's what's collector
Someone
in
may,
air quotes
but
about it. Well,
no one's using it.
yeah, exactly. Well, stateside, because
Yeah.
digging deeper into it, and I'll wrap this up so we can start the film, but just quickly digging deeper into it, I saw that an import version of this film, the Japanese region of it, would be about $30, but prior to looking up this DVD, not knowing
Who
it
knows
wasn't
if they have
distributed
subtitles in English?
Well, exactly. And also you'd have to get a different region Blu-ray, DVD player. It's a hassle.
Okay.
So we're getting this as legal as possible, but unfortunately it's a good film and it's really hard to get.
Yeah. Okay. Well, on that sad note.
Yeah, exactly.
But we're hovering over the play button at the 000 mark, and we're going to click it in 3, 2, 1. All right. Beautiful Toho logo. And we're rearing to go. So, Drew,
What, Joe?
what had you heard about this movie before we watched it?
I knew that it was a sequel. I wasn't aware that it was such a prequel. I knew that it was a prequel, but I wasn't aware it was such a loose prequel to War of the Gargantuans, which better distribution currently, so it's easier to get in packaged with Rodan currently, actually. And everyone talks about that film. Joe, how this film starts out, I love it. I love it. This is like, okay, this version, because we're currently viewing the international version of it, so it is in Japanese with English subtitles. And we'll get to it near the end, possibly throughout, but there's an alternate ending, an extended ending. How it starts, though, is with a close-up of some laboratory equipment. I remember the music being really good, and this is like science fiction horror. It's really setting up.
It is. I love the
lab.
the little detail of the anal beads that we're seeing right here.
Joe, what kind of a podcast are we?
If you know what those are, then you just know what those are.
You know what those are. But it's setting up a Frankenstein type lab. There's a lot of lights going on in the background, and yet it's still very dark. It's sort of just an establishing shot of sorts, I suppose, that you're in a lab. But it's all showing the credits, and I like that there's movement in the credits, because unlike some of these opening credits where it's just static images.
Yeah, they're usually like static painted images of something that mildly like represents the movie that you're looking at. But what I think we're seeing in this little opening shot is them creating
the mood,
the stuff, right?
Yeah. Well, and a somewhat establishing shot. Am I correct?
An establishing shot is bringing you into an
like a surrounding,
like
the setting,
like what we just saw before this shot with the battlefield. That was an establishing
1945.
shot.
So where this starts is World War II.
Yeah,
because World War II and where we are is in Nazi Germany. Mm-hmm. Before reading the plot to this film, I thought that the scientist it's showing currently, I thought he was working for the Nazis. Apparently, he's just a scientist. The Nazis show up in Germany, and his name is Dr. Riesendorf. Never said in the film, as far as I could tell, and yet it was prominent throughout the plot, reading about it. I thought he was working for the Nazis. Apparently, the Nazis just come in and confiscate the... what's he working on, Joe?
He's like the heart of Frankenstein.
And it's
the Frankenstein's monster, not Frankenstein, but we just call him Frankenstein.
And especially in the Toho films of these, when they use Frankenstein. So Toho's, much like Toho's version of King Kong, Toho's version of Frankenstein can really be officially called Frankenstein because that's what they refer to him as.
They refer to him as Frankenstein, and you know what? It does something that's kind of rare when a movie just decides to call the monster Frankenstein.
Yeah.
It did say that the doctor's name, like that there was a Dr. Frankenstein, like they recognized that this was the heart of Frankenstein's monster, but then they just shorthandedly called the monster Frankenstein.
Exactly. Prior to what you just said, when in the film they tell you that it's Frankenstein's monster, which they say once. They call him Frankenstein, and thereafter they call him Frankenstein. So in the Toho-verse of giant monsters, he's Frankenstein.
Officially Frankenstein.
Yeah.
So something that I find really interesting about this movie that we have not seen in any other kaiju movie yet. So in the original Godzilla movie, 1954, Godzilla is made from atomic testing or from a atomic blast, right?
Yeah.
And they kind of allude to the fact, although never explicitly say, that Godzilla was made by the atomic bomb. He absorbed
in any case
its power.
Yeah.
Now, this movie explicitly, we see Hiroshima blow up. I mean, it is so much less just kind of, hinting at certain events in the past. This is actually like shown
on screen the bombing.
It shows us this this heart that's going past. It shows us this mission that they have with the
Nazis handing off the heart of Frankenstein to the Japanese.
Yes. And then it legitimately shows us Hiroshima blowing up.
Yeah,
and
we are there as the audience for that
event.
It's a hospital or something that they're in with the heart.
And it's ruining kind of their situation there.
And reading in a little bit to where that heart comes from, not stated in the film, but apparently this would have been Frankenstein's heart from Dr. Victor Frankenstein, and it survived through the eras of Frankenstein being killed, air quotes, and the heart survived on. And because in the Toho-verse, this heart can kind of regrow Frankenstein through like absorption of protein, so it'll live forever. It's an immortal heart. Apparently he's lived through the ages being destroyed, regrowing, maybe partially or fully being destroyed, regrowing, and then this heart just lives on.
So the heart lives on. Does the nuclear bomb affect the heart? That's what I was wondering.
Yeah, well, what it seems like, because the scientists do state in the film, the main characters in the film say that he's immune to radiation, that he absorbs it, and I'm not quite sure if that's what makes him grow, but certainly the consumption of protein makes him grow. Yeah, I really like this Frankenstein. It's cool. He makes for a cool monster, in my opinion.
I just find like the kind of the realism with the war footage is unusual for these kaiju movies that we've been seeing, especially this one's mid-60s. This one's like in the time of kind of crappy Godzilla. And so
they actually had quite a budget to this film.
This is unusually well done, and like we're seeing actual air quotes here, war footage. But it's people killing each other here. That's the different thing, right?
Yeah, and it's always good to have Nazi bad guys in your film, man. They make for such good bad guys, and they're really not in this film. They're just here briefly, but that they originate from Nazi Germany. That's where
they had to get Frankenstein over to Japan somehow.
And something in the film that's a little, it's interesting, is that they call Victor Frankenstein a German scientist. Okay, in the original book, I guess, he was born in Naples, Italy, and was raised in Geneva, Switzerland. So it's not really German, but when you get the word Frankenstein, so you got Stein at the end. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. German. So, didn't read into it too much.
Well, you speak German, Drew, so...
Yeah,
you can.
Hansi.
You can go ahead and say you're an expert. It's okay.
Yeah.
All right. So apparently, the sequence where they were taking the heart, kind of the sneak mission around and stuff like that, that was sort of influenced by a real life event. So it was an actual World War II incident that I had never heard of, and I kind of want to look more into. It's when a German-Japanese plot was devised to turn much of the United States into a radioactive wasteland, basically.
Oh, of course.
And a Japanese submarine called the I-52 was on its way to Japan from Germany, carrying the ingredients for an atomic bomb.
Ooh.
And it was sunk by a U.S. Navy warplane on June 24th, 1944.
Well, in all, like I said, as having Nazis in fictional stories and having them be the bad guys, it's wonderful. It makes for great storytelling when they're the bad guys using like science fiction black magic type stuff as their weapon. So this Frankenstein monster, and then in like Indiana Jones, where you get them seeking after the Ark of the Covenant and things like that, because real life Nazi Germany was looking for anything to win, really, and they're going through black magic, dark arts, all this stuff that's not real.
It's ridiculous.
But exactly.
Yeah.
When you put it into a film and make it real, oh man, it lends for some great fiction.
Yeah, what's interesting here is Takeshi Shimura shows up with this Frankenstein heart.
Yeah, wonderful
and
cameo.
He's playing yet another doctor. It's not Dr. Serizawa, in case anybody doesn't know the actor's names, but it's
Takeshi
the
Shimura.
lead of Seven Samurai, and he's the paleontologist from the first Godzilla movie.
Was in
and
many,
then
many
they're
Kurosawa
blown
films.
up by the Hiroshima bomb.
And we see the fire engulfing the hospital. We see the fire. We see the mushroom cloud.
Dude,
Immediately cuts to afterward.
look at that. Like
powerful imagery. This movie does not shy away from that explosion.
It's amazing. It's amazing, not only practical effect work, because it looks incredible, but also just kind of the bravery of filmmaking.
Very much so.
How many times have you seen in Japanese movies the Hiroshima bomb?
And especially nowadays, being that far removed from it, that many years later, this is a little bit closer to when that happened.
Exactly.
Imagine if we had, as part of a plot point to an American film, like the Twin Tower bombings, not in like a dramatic film, but in like a fictional...
The bombings or the planes?
The blowing up of the Twin Towers. It would be strange. This would have been strange, I can assume. I mean, I don't know. It's great, though.
I've seen some September 11th sort of movies. Yeah, they exist.
Yeah, made into something that's sort of...
But they're usually about...
Yeah, and it's
Twin Towers.
usually more of a realistic, dramatic...
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's interesting that they'd use something that was such a devastating real life event as part of a plot point towards just a fictional Frankenstein
look,
movie.
they film it though. I mean, there's a science fiction plot going on with this heart that's obviously in this jar that's still beating, right?
Yeah, let's go into
it. reminded me of Pirates of the Caribbean 3 a lot.
Oh, yeah. With what's the Davy Jones locker or something with that pirate?
Yeah, it was one of I don't know.
Those films are okay.
But anyway, but despite being underlined by that stupid science fiction-y stuff, the war sequences that we just saw for the first 10 minutes of the movie, up to the Hiroshima bomb blowing up, taken quite seriously, that section. So I actually like the way they handled it, and I thought it was really cool. And when we were watching this for the first time, I was like, I can't believe they're doing this.
Yeah, and
it's so different.
Where we're at now, the science of the film, other than, when we describe it in just the bare bones of the film, the structure of the film with Frankenstein growing due to intake of protein and becoming giant, able to fight these other giant monsters, Baragon in this film. Mm-hmm. Other than that, really the science fiction doesn't stray too far from, real science, where like right now, all it is just effects of radiation and growth of, creatures. I don't know. It doesn't get too unrealistic, which I can appreciate.
So this was yet another co-production. We've hit one of these already with Godzilla, or what was it? It was Godzilla versus
King Kong versus Godzilla?
No, Invasion of the Astro Monster. Sorry,
yes.
I was getting my names mixed up.
That
which also had Nick Adams in it, playing an astronaut in that movie. This was produced by the same, or co-produced by the same company, so it was Toho and then UPA, which was like United Pictures of America or something like that. And the producer, the guy in charge of that, was Henry G. Saperstein.
Yeah, a name which seemed familiar to us.
They produced at least 3 films together, including this film, Invasion of the Astro Monsters, and War of the Gargantuans, which is the sequel to this one. Does War of the Gargantuans star Nick Adams? Do you know?
It would have. They replaced him with Russ Tamblyn due to Nick Adams dying.
Oh crap! Yeah. Okay, all right.
Yeah. What's Joe? I like this film. I'm having a brain fart currently.
You're having a brain
Nick
fart.
Adams. Okay. I'm just trying to find out which one came first: Invasion of the Astro Monster or Frankenstein Conquers the World.
I'm not sure, but we did talk about
They both
Nick
say
Adams
1965.
Okay.
And again, Henry Saperstein was a key figure in along with Tanaka on the Japanese side of these joint productions of films. They wanted to take American actors over to Japan and use them to make films that would have mass appeal to both the Japanese and the American audience, and really, therefore, as being a co-production, have much more appeal worldwide as well.
All right, so Henry G. Saperstein was a U.S. film producer, and he purchased UPA from its original co-founder, Stephen Busosto, after one of their pictures, which was like a Mr. Magoo film called 1001 Arabian Nights, was
the
released.
Animated ones, of course.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So we know Mr. Magoo because of crap. I forgot the name of the actor, but
live action.
The live action Mr.
Something
Magoo
Nelson.
came out probably around when we were young children. But the cartoons that film was based on. There was a series of television series that this company produced, UPA, and a few movies as well. And Henry G. Saperstein, used their financial straits to take over that company. And basically, he produced more Mr. Magoo stuff. He produced some other cartoon television shows, including I think some Dick Tracy stuff.
Okay,
if I'm not mistaken. And
older,
then
popular animated.
Later on in his career, he started producing Toho monster movies as well, and he died in 1998 of cancer. But that's pretty much all the information I have on Henry G. Saperstein.
Certainly an early influential figure for co-productions. This film was originally billed as being, I don't know whether this is true or not, but in its original release, it's billed as the first film collaboration between Japan and the U.S.
Oh, really?
Would have been, a selling point, I suppose.
Is that true, though?
Well,
that's what I wonder.
I know. That would be something hard to just look up.
I have no idea.
So, one thing we can say is the versions released in Japan and the U.S. were nearly identical. I've seen differences between the amount cut from one version to the other. In all cases, the U.S. version is shorter. How much it is, I can't tell, really. It says anywhere between 2 to 5 minutes. To talk about the film here for a minute, what we're watching is... So, we talked extensively about the bombing. Then we're introduced to it's 15 years later, that same area where the Hiroshima bombing occurred, and a scientist laboratory where they're studying radiation. We're introduced to our lead characters, Nick Adams, of course, and Mizuno? Let's see right here. Kumi Mizuno, sorry.
Yeah, which was the woman that Nick Adams has been rumored to have a relationship with.
Yeah, in
offset.
real life, yeah.
Yeah.
And he's... That's what's so interesting is that they're so often put together in these films. These two play the leads, and yet there is a third lead who I really appreciated the dynamic of the drama between the three of them. Tadao Takashima is the third scientist.
He was also in...
I believe he's in Mothra vs. Godzilla.
He was in... I don't think he was in Mothra. He was in Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 2 when he was older.
Yeah.
And Son of Godzilla. He's one of the people in Son of Godzilla.
I was going to say, early on, his face seemed familiar from a lot of this Showa era of films. And what they see 15 years later is they are... Both Nick Adams and Kumi Mizuno's character are in Kumi Mizuno's apartment, and they see a young boy who they call a waif. Well, we keep hearing the word waif thrown around. What did that mean?
Drew didn't know what the word waif meant.
Did you know what it meant?
I kind of knew what it meant.
Okay.
Yeah, it was some waif herring kind of thing. So it was like a homeless child or vagrant.
Seems something as dangerous, kind of, because they were saying that there was a lot of them post-war.
Yeah, it seems
they're kind of like rabid human beings almost.
Common. I assume that people probably lost their parents a lot in the war, and
they kind of become feral human beings. And so
you could say that a waif is a feral human being. Yeah,
something that's human but only barely. And anyway, they see him in Kumi Mizuno's character's near her apartment. They see a car accidentally hit him. He's actually uninjured, is what I found out through reading the plot, because what we thought, they throw some food at him, and we thought, oh, he just got hurt, and they just threw food down at him. he leaves. We cut to a year later, and these characters are...
Yeah, this was
at
an
a
odd
shrine.
cut. This
Yeah.
was an odd cut.
It was
I do want to say
strange.
that, I mean, this movie is unusually serious and dark for a Toho picture in
And
the
I think
early
it's played,
1960s.
I think it's played well, though.
It is played very well, and that's honestly like one of the things that I like about this movie is that it's so serious. But I mean, look, we saw a nuclear bomb, and then we saw a kid get ran over by a taxi.
Yeah.
The taxi driver checks, freaks out, and then drives off.
Yep, it's a hit and run.
It's a hit and run. And I was like, what? What?
Well, we were captivated at that point, interested in what's going on in our film. So this year later, I'm going to quit saying Kumi Mizuno and Nick Adams' character. I want to know their names. I think it's Sueko is Kumi,
Okay.
and James Bowen. So just whatever Nick Adams will say. But Sueko and James and Nick Adams. A year later, they're at the shrine. They're mourning the loss of a patient at their radiation clinic that died a year earlier that they were both fond of, I guess. And they see the same waif. And it's that same boy. It's the same boy. And he's larger, I suppose. The locals are terrified of him, so they're trying to, get him out of the cave.
Well,
that
the
they find him
locals,
in.
I think they just have a real problem with homeless people.
Yeah, eating their cats, eating their dogs,
Yeah.
eating their rabbits.
That could just be a Japanese thing where they really hate homeless people. I have no idea.
Along with the serious tone of this film that you were talking about, it's because it was co-written by Takeshi Kimura, who he's the serious part of the duo
there's
of
basically
writers.
the two main screenwriters for the Showa era Godzilla films.
Shinichi Sekizawa, less serious.
Yeah, he was the one who of course we
Gross.
blamed for
Son of Godzilla.
for making the Godzilla movie so lighthearted and
Oh yeah, with becoming a defender of the world.
yeah.
Anyway, he is your lighthearted half, so you can almost always tell who wrote which films. And then Takeshi Kimura is the darker, more serious films, flavor-wise. So he wrote this film. This is actually, he considered Matango, he wrote the screenplay for Ishiro Honda, to be his best work. And from this film and beyond, he considered these works to be merely work for hire. But I think he did a good job in this film.
With this movie especially. Now,
He
there is
tied-
another co-writer who is credited.
Yes,
And it's not a Japanese name, and I have no information on him, whether or not there was, because this was a co-production, whether or not there was an English language version of the script, or if there was like a treatment or something and then it was brought into Japanese, or vice versa. I have no idea, but there is another writer that is credited that we have no information on.
Always, it seems like in these co-productions, because it's taking place over in Japan, of course they bring over Americans to,
Ruben
co-produce the film.
Barkovich.
But the bulk of the work, Japanese. They have the American actor. They have, as we're reading, the American counterpart to the screenplay. It's co-written, I suppose. But to what extent, it's kind of unclear.
All right, so near the end of the first act here,
Baragon shows up.
yeah, we have our first glimpse at Baragon, and this is part of the movie that you thought, or at least like kind of this thread that when we were watching it, you were complaining about, and I didn't really mind it too much. But
I only complained about it at this point because I didn't think they'd tie it in very well at the end. But, you don't need that much detail into Baragon.
But what happens here is that we're working on an oil rig or something like that, and then Baragon destroys some stuff. No one else really sees the monster, but one guy kind of gets a glimpse of the monster.
And this is plot driving, man.
Yeah, and later on, he tries to convince our characters that, and they're convinced very easily,
So easily.
that there was actually another monster that, when all this sort of stuff happens and Frankenstein is later blamed for it, he is going, no, man, there's another monster out there, and I'm telling you.
I swear, I'm the only one that saw it,
I'm
but
telling
I swear.
you, he's the one doing this stuff, not Frankenstein, which is a loose. There's not much ground, to to walk upon as far as that
for his theories.
As far as that theory goes, and just how easily they're convinced. But
this
is a very cool construction destruction sequence.
Oh yeah, I didn't realize that they. So it somewhat clearly shows Baragon. He kind of pokes his head up through the destruction, but because earlier on we see a rabbit torn apart in a school, and that makes the newspapers, and that's like the transition from that and kids discovering it and screaming, running away. Then Kumi Mizuno's character, Sueko, sees that in the paper, and that's our transition to them kind of finding Frankenstein. They don't know he's Frankenstein at this point. He's just like a waif. That made the newspapers, but this big eruption, like you find out later, I guess they just
this could have been Deepwater Horizon. It was like
it's a big oil rig exploding, and I just didn't realize that nobody else saw Baragon, only this man, and that man is plot driving man. He just is like, because he's also the character who clues our scientists into the fact that he's Frankenstein at all. He was there delivering the heart to Takeshi Shimura's character, the surgeon in the Hiroshima hospital right before it's bombed. So he was there to know that it was Frankenstein, and that, they delivered Frankenstein's heart. Otherwise, that would not be a part of this plot at all, because our scientists would have no way of having figured that out. Then he finds he's there for Baragon showing up, and he comes to the scientists again and is like, no, there's another monster. There was not a single solitary other character that would have been able to bring that to light for the scientists. Anyway, for some reason, it's very important to our main characters that Frankenstein be known to be Caucasian. He's Caucasian.
Yeah, what is up with that?
I think the only reason
because he has to be German.
Exactly. He has to have come from somewhere other than Japan.
But this actor,
clearly Japanese.
Just so Japanese.
It wouldn't be such a big thing if they weren't over and over, he's Caucasian. They just kind of slip that in. Oh, yeah, and he's Caucasian.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
I keep thinking,
what's funny to me is that the Nick Adams character is the one who's like, oh, this guy's obviously white. It's like, no.
We get a pervy Frankenstein here, man.
So he's obviously... Dude. Well, it looks like he's a pervy Frankenstein, and then it turns out he's just like looking at the necklace, right?
Nick Adams' character has so much passion in what he does. Really, though. Okay, so he was going for the necklace. He wasn't going for her lady parts.
So one of the things that I find just really great about this movie in comparison to the movies that were coming out around the same time, as far as kaiju films are concerned, the cinematography, despite being the same cinematographer that Ishiro Honda used most of the time, it's exceptional in this movie. I don't know why, what creative changes that they decided to experiment with as far as this movie are concerned. I don't know why. It's especially good. But the cinematography, we see, of course, later on, probably one of the best shot fight monster battles ever.
Well shot, well choreographed.
Yeah. And also one of the most beautifully lit.
Oh, by far, the fact that we see the fire.
Yeah.
But Joe, I agree.
And
I almost want to say, so watching the films themselves and feeling like how good of a film it is, say this in comparison to Ebirah, Horror of the Deep, or Son of Godzilla, you can feel that the movie may have had more excitement behind it for the crew. They're more excited to actually film it.
I disagree with Ebirah.
Okay.
Son of Godzilla. Yeah,
well, that was the start of the downfall, I believe. That's still a good film because Ebirah was like a shot in the left field from where they had come from, and so it's like they're trying out something new. When you continue in that direction and start devolving down into Son of Godzilla, all of a sudden the crew seems to take a less interest. I don't know. I think it shows through in the production quality of the film.
Ebirah is filmed in a different style, so that's why I disagree with you.
True.
And the Ishiro Honda is still a much
this
more
is still Honda. set shots, frame shots.
He's very steady, very classically.
Yes, that's what I was going
everything's very classically directed, and
I like the way they do this effect with
it's
Frankenstein
still that way
being
here,
larger.
But like, look at the cinematography with the bars and kind of like.
Oh yeah,
there's an extra depth to the lighting and the imagery in this movie.
And for some reason, finding like GIFs and images of the Frankenstein monster from this film, they usually show this shot where Frankenstein is in a cage. This is right after he starts growing, so they have to keep him in chains and in a cage because, of course, he's not dangerous, but people are afraid of him, not only because he's growing larger, but because he doesn't speak in this film. Unlike the American depiction in Boris Karloff's, portrayal of Frankenstein in that 1931 film, he could speak, but barely. This one, he cannot speak, but thanks to Sueko, the female scientist, he can understand human speech. And he's not dangerous, but people are scared of him.
Yeah, he's not dangerous. That is something that's interesting in this movie.
Everyone assumes so, though. Everyone.
Yeah. So, unlike Godzilla or someone that actually like destroys things, anything that Frankenstein destroys, it's accidental.
Yes.
Or, he's acting like a child. There's no menace.
Yeah, and
the Frankenstein in this movie has absolutely no menace, and all these people are treating him
like he's a monster.
Like a monster. Yeah.
That would be the same in the original American portrayal of Boris Karloff, but the difference here seems that I don't know, he's more human in Boris Karloff's portrayal. Here he's so much more of an animal, really a monster, because he's going to be going up against monsters. There seems to be no use in this film for portraying him as being more human than monster. He has human emotions because he swings in to save the day, save his female scientist at the end from Baragon eating her. But I love that they don't waste time on like developing him because he doesn't need to be at all. He's just there to be a monster. And yet I still feel for him.
I think there's something purposeful there. So
yeah,
I think Ishiro Honda or the screenwriter, I think they know that they're trying to say something with this movie, and it's something much like the original Frankenstein. They're trying to say something about the childlike just creature that Frankenstein is, but everybody's scared of him because he's so big,
he's into the
and
unknown.
He's so different, and it's so unusual, and so we have very few characters in this movie that give him the benefit of the doubt, except for the guy who saw Baragon.
It's saying something about human nature, for sure.
It's saying something, and I think it might be saying something pretty profound, but I would have to think about it for a while.
Yeah, it's definitely fear of the unknown, but they put it... It's so understated, and I love it because it is there, but it's definitely not in your face.
I think it's most in your face. I might disagree with you a little bit. I think there's the part where the one scientist goes in and he's going to hack off his arm to find out if he truly is what they say he is. Obviously, part of him is going, well,
I shouldn't do this.
I shouldn't do this. And then part of him is like, well, if he's actually Frankenstein, he's fine.
We need to find out, yeah.
And so he takes a drink before he's about to do it.
Yeah,
I thought he was going to give it
to the creature, yeah.
And I thought, and we're going to get to that scene not too far from now.
I strayed from what I was saying, but mostly what you're going to see stills, gifts from this movie is Frankenstein being chained up in this cage, and how Joe was saying he's lit is through the bars of the cage, and it looks great.
It does.
It's a good effect too that they have the actor who's portraying Frankenstein in a smaller cage, like a miniature, so he looks large. He's very rarely blue screened in with the actors. It's mostly just showing him from a low angle shot and again in the small cage to appear larger than he really is. I love the progression of the makeup as well on Frankenstein. He looks more and more like a monster, and only very early on does the makeup look sort of Later on, especially in his like fully Frankenstein form, where he gets all the hair on himself and is wearing like the animal skin garb, I think he looks great. He's a great monster.
the title monsters in this film, apparently, and I'm reading our Bible right now. Frankenstein is 66 feet tall, or 20 meters, and Baragon is 25 meters, or 82 feet tall. And they actually had to adjust kind of what their standard size for kaiju movies were, as far as like miniature scales.
Well, and as far as I can tell,
so the miniature scale, usually the standard was 125. It was 1 to 25. Okay. And now it's 1 to 15 because the monsters are slightly smaller. And so they had to change kind of like the way that they did things in this movie.
Well, what helps with that too is they have a completely new monster, and there's not a lot of filming with the monsters in suburban areas. They're mostly in like forested areas. So I guess you can still see that ratio of like miniaturization in the forests, but it's less visible than if they were in like suburbia in cities.
Yeah, so one of the special effect guys, whose name is Inoue, says, "We made the smaller things bigger. Eventually, the size of the miniature was comparable to human size, so they had to like change things as they went along. It was not a good method for the dimensions, but we did things after deciding Frankenstein's height. Then we arranged the exact figures in the best places on sort of the drawings, and the size of the miniatures. I don't know. Some were smaller, some were larger, and they just had to deal with that. But basically, when they're full size, it's 115.
It seems like, for me at least, the best way to realize how big Frankenstein or Baragon are in this film would be to see them up against these animals, where he sees, he sees the boar, and then with the horse, There's actually quite a bit on the horse that we got to get to.
Oh yeah.
I thought, Joe, that in this area of the plot where the third scientist, the Japanese scientist, who's for destroying Frankenstein, the other two are for preserving Frankenstein, and for a majority of for a portion of the film, they're okay with destroying Frankenstein because they have his hand, which we'll see. So it's very interesting because for once we have these scientists who are, at first, they need to preserve him because they need to study him. But then they're okay with destroying him because they have his living hand that falls off of the chain because he's growing and they haven't made his chains larger. So what we see is a makeup effect where his chains are cutting into his wrists. I understood, Joe, that when this scientist comes upon the advice of Dr. Riesendorf, the Nazi scientist who was tampering with Godzilla's heart in 1945, to come to cut off his arm or leg. Yes, Dr. Frankenstein monster. I understood that this TV crew that just shows up was there with him. But no, they're just showing up. They have like a warrant to film the monster. It's great that always the violence is initiated because of like something that we humans do. And they're just being dumb. They turn on these studio lights, and it could have been just as easy as turning them on to just turn them off, but instead they're like fumbling to turn the lights off.
They are grips, so what are you gonna do?
Oh man, that's a bash on.
Well, here's the thing. I remember like when we first watched this movie, they like from really far away they started going down the stairs with the equipment. I'm like, that's a TV crew, and
like an actual.
It's like.
You can just tell because of the way they walk.
I can just tell. I can just tell because of the way they were carrying, like what the equipment they were carrying and how they were carrying equipment. So it was funny to me.
You can tell that's their job to carry the equipment and the way they.
I could tell. And they were cast as such.
Then I guess you're happy that they die, that they're killed by Frankenstein.
No, I'm not. No, never. But they should have been. They should have had more respect for the.
Always, in order to further the drama, the people who incite the monster's rage have to be killed, because then it justifies our anger towards the creature more because he has killed, even if it's inadvertently. Like you said, he only kills accidentally. He doesn't do it intentionally or maliciously. He is a gentle giant, but he does in no way appears so because he's frightened. Really, Frankenstein is always frightened, and yet he appears to be angry and malicious, but he's not. What astonished me so much, Joe, because he's just eating. He's broken out, but he doesn't even leave the cell. He's just eating.
Yeah.
Is all of the miniature sets that Frankenstein walks through, We see the cage at the beginning, and then he's going to be next to Sueko's apartment. Oh, wow. That's pretty graphic violence to show for one of these films, to show the crushed film crew underneath the bars and blood on them. Not much, but there is blood on them. Nick Adams' character has to be heroic, and he was held back by like 10 people.
That's awesome.
Running after the monster. Yeah. So I love all the different miniatures to show the scale of the monster in like suburban areas. Again, we said he doesn't do much fighting in these areas to show his scale, but he was being held captive in this laboratory area. Then he has to escape, so you see a miniature set of what we kept seeing the characters go back and forth in between.
Yeah, exactly. So something that's unusual for these movies, besides like an entire cityscape or whatever, which we've seen in
as opposed
movies.
To that, we have a lot of different miniatures.
Later on, it's more apparent there's a quarry that they go into, and obviously they had to remake that exact same place in miniature.
About a forest area? Or?
And it's like the rock quarry.
Because there's some steps, like the degradation.
And it's matched perfectly, like the miniature to what the actors were actually in. Or maybe it was an optical effect, but either way, it was done extremely well.
I love this effect too. When the monster, prior to he escapes the cage, he has this tender moment with Sueko where he's looking into her apartment and she speaks to him, and he knows he can't be around anymore. He knows that people hate him.
He done did bad.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Oh man, I'm feeling so much. My emotions are for this monster. Yeah. And then again, the great miniature of him being around Sueko's apartment, and I'm pretty sure that's a mat behind him, the painting of like the apartments, and yet he can like walk away.
I think that might be a miniature.
Gosh,
like a
it's
miniature
wonderful.
set. And it's extremely well done.
Oh, extremely.
Look at this.
This is some high quality miniatures.
I know you guys at home can't look at it unless you're watching it along with us, but seriously, look at it.
What we see most often in Toho films as miniature cities is a city, exactly a city, where it's skyscrapers, it's large traffic areas, but you got to have a lot of buildings because you got to have a lot for monsters to crush. What he's in here is it's filmed nighttime, dusk, yet he's kind of just in a suburban like apartment-y area, and he's not that large, like you were saying, because he hasn't grown that large yet. To see the actor, again, we feel a lot more for him because it is an actor in like light makeup compared to a monster suit. Oh man, I just feel so much for the character, and so my involvement in the film is much more than a lot of these films.
I agree. So I think it was who was the name of the guy who's usually in the Godzilla suit?
Hiroyo Nakajima.
Hiroyo Nakajima. He was Baragon in this movie.
So for him, it's got to be kind of harsh. He gets defeated. He's usually the defeater.
Yeah, exactly.
Or at least a tie match, when he's Godzilla, who he usually is.
So he remembers kind of working on his Baragon movements, right?
Okay. God, he is such he really studies into these roles. When you think, he's going to be a suit actor, he's not even going to be shown, but he really studies for his movements that he's going to do.
Yeah. So basically what he tried to do was he tried to make it move like a snake. I'm not sure how well he did it, but that was kind of like his thing that he tried to do, was he tried to make Baragon move like a snake. So when it would move forward, he would try to walk in like a zigzaggy sort of way.
Yeah.
And then like there's a direct quote here, but when the snake recoils to strike or something like that, there's an actual like movement with that.
Yeah, like its head arches back and its neck.
Yeah, and he apparently he it's hard to do in those kind of suits, but that's what he tried to base Baragon on, and I thought that was kind of cool.
I would imagine that he'd go for that type of an animal portrayal due to Baragon being like a burrowing, tunneling type monster, even though he's a little bulkier, so snake kind of doesn't make too much sense there because he's like tunneling. I can see that.
We're in the very sci-fi section of the movie.
Yeah, which I love. Science fiction horror.
Yeah. So, because of the wrist restraints on Frankenstein, he kept on getting bigger and bigger, and he's in this wrist restraint in this cage. And he gets out. His hand does not come with him.
One of them he has to break out of the chain,
which is screwed up.
Yeah, awesome.
But later the scientists are like, where is it? There was a hand here. Where'd it go?
Yeah.
I left it right here. And then
well, they knew it was alive, but I think they were trying to somewhat keep it contained.
yeah, and then they come back and there's this just the big fat hand, and I'm not sure what kind of effect it was, whether or not it was
I think it's an animatronic,
like an animatronic in some way, or if it was like some dudes just like in some like trick photography or whatever. But the hand, there was a crawling on the ground, much like I would say like Cousin It.
Yeah. No,
or not Cousin
Thing.
It, but the Thing from Addams Family. You're right. Cousin It is the hair, right, covering the entire body.
Yeah,
that's right. Thanks for reminding me. Anyway, and then they have to take that big hand, they put it into a bucket, and
they feed it protein somehow.
Big hand. It's cool. I like it. It's
we said it's a science fiction horror where loosely all of these films are, but like that specifically, that element, it's like
a hand moving on its own without an arm.
So much science fiction horror, like specific elements of the genre, many of them in this film.
Very Western.
For goodness sake, you have Frankenstein in the title and as a main character, portrayed so well. Mm-hmm. Joe, we should get into, because that's interesting, the origination of the screenplay for this film. The name Willis O'Brien pops into mind, where Willis O'Brien was the effects artist for King Kong. Originally, I don't know when, sometime around making King Kong, he pitched a film where King Kong would be pitted against a giant version of Frankenstein's monster. So again, this is all American at that point. Idea never adopted by Universal or RKO, so it was stolen by the independent producer John Beck and pitched to Toho.
That's right. We talked about something, either this or something similar during King Kong versus Godzilla.
And what that eventually became, so he pitched it to Toho under the title King Kong versus Prometheus, a name for Frankenstein from the book, I suppose. Toho agreed to produce a film using Beck's project, so they were going to buy it from him, and it's not even his idea, totally stolen. But it never...
Cha-ching.
Yeah, exactly. They wanted to replace Frankenstein with their own monster, Godzilla. Project ultimately became King Kong versus Godzilla. So Toho had to, of course, arrange a deal with RKO for the use of character Kong, because, Joe, we always say they had to strike a deal with Universal, but at the time, RKO still owned the rights to Kong, so it was always RKO that they were dealing with. Then what happened, more progression into this story, is that the producer Tomoyuki Tanaka had this idea for quite a while. He wanted to commission a film called Frankenstein, so they just really wanted to use Frankenstein, versus The Human Vapor. It was going to be a sequel to The Human Vapor, which was a Toho film early on here, and many of the plot elements of this were going to show up in this film. What that again next progressed into was they revived the idea that never happened, that film, Frankenstein versus the Human Vapor. It turned into an idea for Frankenstein. It was going to be a sequel to King Kong versus Godzilla. Frankenstein versus Godzilla. In that draft, they wanted to have Godzilla being discovered in an iceberg in the Bering Sea, while a giant monster grows from the irradiated heart of Frankenstein's monster. So that element went into this film, where, irradiated heart growing into Frankenstein's monster.
The monster, Godzilla, eventually turned into a new monster, though.
Yes, it had to, because Toho wasn't really into... this would have been after Raids, so Godzilla had already been freed from his icy prison, So that plot element they didn't like, because he was freed and then escaped. I mean, at the end of the film, he leaves. Yeah. And then to put him back into his icy cage, and then the way that they were going to have to coax Godzilla into fighting Frankenstein was kind of not so good.
They just couldn't figure out how to write it in. Huh?
Yeah, that's so they ended up just creating a new monster. What Godzilla did go on to do past that, instead of the sequel to King Kong versus Godzilla being, of course, Frankenstein versus Godzilla, never got made. They chose to pit him against Mothra, and then later on, this became, Frankenstein versus Baragon. So they just created a new monster.
There is something that's often repeated, and we're seeing the scene right here, and this has been repeated since the first Godzilla movie.
You're talking about this element of the film?
Raids again. I swear to God, we've seen this in other ones as well. And
it was in Ibira loosely.
It was in Ibira as well. Okay, yeah. People dancing in a Hawaiian party on a boat or anywhere. And then the monster shows up and they're like, hey, what's that out in the sea?
It's just so interesting that I assumed this was going to be Baragon because we see swimming, but we don't see what it is. And then Frankenstein pops out of the water.
And he's like, oh, I'm big now.
He has to be huge at this point in order to stand in the bay, which, of course, he's standing.
That is a freaky composite shot, by the way.
Oh, it's so... The way that the Frankenstein monster is lit and
kind of the way he's moving. And I think they must be filming him at a
lower speed.
At a lower speed.
They do a great job as he gets bigger, filming him slower and slower in order to show the more accentuated movement of him being so large. Oh, God, you're really seeing his chest, and it's all torn apart. That's awesome. I didn't notice that the first time. The makeup effects of a scar down Frankenstein's chest. So he doesn't really do anything, but it's to show his size at this point. He just kind of pushes along the boat. Of course, the patrons on this Hawaiian dance party going on this cruise are freaked out, but luckily he doesn't harm them. He just kind of goes back into the water.
But yeah, it's kind of an out of place scene, but I think it's a very cool, very well shot and very cool sequence though.
Yeah, because at this point in the film they've lost Frankenstein. He's gone, he's escaped, and they're kind of on the search for him.
So do you think that Nick Adams' character and crap, I forgot her name.
Kumi
Mizuno's character. Do you think they have a thing
on or off screen?
In the world of this movie, do you think that there's
absolutely, Joe? Absolutely. What we're shown, we see 2 scenes of them, just the 2 of them in her apartment, and they're always eating. They're on dates, but in her apartment. So, what do you think they're doing post her? Post them eating?
Yeah.
But of course, they still maintain the professional relationship as well as scientists.
Yeah, it seems like
it's an interesting plot. There. Part of the plot. Yeah. They've lost the hand. The hand escaped. It grew larger, and then they find out that it can die. What they assumed is that it would live on forever, like the heart, because for some reason, Joe, it just seems to make sense in a fictional universe that the center of the monster, the heart, will forever live on, right? Because it's its core. It can't die.
The heart will go on, yeah.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. That was great. Yet the hand, since it's just an extension, can die. So perhaps then if that hand were allowed to live and continue to mutate and grow, it would eventually grow a body and another heart?
Right? See, then you just be every time you clip his fingernails, he makes a clone.
That's what I was thinking, too, is that if given enough protein, all these parts that fall off of them, you're going to have the world infested with Frankensteins. Oh, man, then eventually would they become cannibal rats where they're eating each other for protein?
Wow.
We're reading really deep into this at this point.
Yeah, very.
The world's overrun by Frankensteins. Eventually, they consume all protein, so they just consume each other. So eventually, if humans were allowed to survive somehow in a bunker or up in space, I don't know how they'd survive, the Frankensteins would just eliminate themselves. Of course, the world would be a barren wasteland and we wouldn't have any protein.
We're about to see my favorite thing in this entire movie.
His childish endeavors. Even though he's huge.
So he sees a bird out in the sky, he throws a tree at the bird.
Tree, uproots
and then the tree slams into this man's shed.
And a wonderful composite shot of the actor's blue screened in next to a cabin. That's a miniature, great miniature. And exactly... all that Frankenstein wanted to do in his childish play, whatever he's doing, is to kill a bird for food. He misses horribly, crushes their cabin, and later this becomes a plot point where they're able to find him.
Man, that cabin slamming though, that was this
is a freaky shot.
Excellent. Excellent.
I'm so sad that the distribution of this film is so poor at this point because I want people to see this. This is a good one.
It is a good one. So now he's seeing a wild boar, which is unusually fake wild boar. I don't know why they decided to go with miniatures for the creatures. They did this a couple times in this movie. We're going to see a horse later.
Yeah, and what I was reading, I'm going to try to find where this stuff is at.
That's a little trap. I think it's cool.
Is that okay? Oh, here's something, Joe. Ifukube reused some of the score from Daikaiju Varon from our last film we watched. I thought the score fit for this film, but it wasn't like it didn't stand out. There is
a theme that they keep repeating. That seems to be the theme of this movie. Like
the theme is in like the musical.
Yeah, there's a musical cue that is often repeated in this movie that I thought was very good, and that it set kind of the serious tone that I of course enjoy from this movie.
Yeah.
And so I know he reused tracks from there. I know he reused tracks from, I want to say he reused some tracks from Mothra vs. Godzilla I was reading, although I didn't notice personally.
It sounded familiar. It sounded very Ifukube.
Yeah. And, often composers just start sounding like themselves anyway, but if they're a good composer, then I'm not going to complain.
Yeah,
it's like, have you heard the E.T. score?
Yeah, you mentioned that
up to the Imperial March.
Yeah, like you mentioned that in a podcast
there's
already.
Dun, 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 and then there's dun, 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 dun. It's like just total... It's very similar.
Yeah, you mentioned that in a podcast.
I'm sure I did. It's
the total conundrum for like a composer would be they want to get their scores, well known and famous. But once they are, the less of a variation. Yeah. Yes, the less of a variation they make on their music, people will notice. Yeah. Of course, that would have been the case for Eiji Tsuburaya, where he was. But
he made so many musical scores,
so much, so many per year as well, and not just because we're watching these monster films. He was doing them for every genre of film, including because unlike the composer for Ibira, who great composer, but he had no aspirations beyond film scoring. Ifukube had a lot of aspiration for actual orchestral, live music.
Yeah.
Which, I don't know if I mentioned that to you, but not too long ago, there was I think I showed it to you, a live orchestra of Ifukube's scores. Remember that? I showed you.
There was a concert
It was
somewhere?
in Chicago, yeah.
Oh, very cool. Every time it's always in Chicago.
Oh, no.
What's up with that?
That also happened with Pokemon, and they're like, anyway, they do like Legend of Zelda orchestras as well. Getting off topic, but we're going to see soon here, Baragon shows up again, and this time
every time people are partying, there's always a monster that shows up.
Yeah. And you don't really know. We know as the audience that it wasn't Frankenstein. Characters in the film aren't aware that Baragon exists at this point, so they assume that Frankenstein is the one killing people and eating them. I had to say, Joe, upon thinking about it, because we never see in Godzilla films Godzilla like eating things, especially people.
Except for 1998 Godzilla eats fish.
Yeah, that one's Zilla, Joe. That is not Godzilla, as pointed out by many listeners to this podcast.
But it is actually canon, which is crazy.
Yeah, but according to Toho canon, that is not Godzilla. That is Zilla.
All right, fine.
But what comes across as an audience member, and especially as a huge fan of these films, Godzilla always remains more of a message. He's literally godlike in the sense that we never see him eat. He's just a mass destruction that comes, and it gives him less animal characteristics when he's not eating, really. He just comes to destroy. So he's got a big message behind him always, or he represents something larger than himself. Baragon is a giant creature, a giant beast animal, because it eats people, it eats livestock, and he's a nuisance. We think that it's Frankenstein, but of course Frankenstein never directly harms people.
I don't even know, was it like too dark for these people to see who actually attacked them, or they were just too scared?
You gotta say that those guys, because the girl hears Baragon tunneling through the mountain before he crushes their place, their like dance hall, and the guy's like, "Oh, it's nothing." Of course, the guy's preoccupied.
Do you hear that?
The girl's a little nervous.
I hear something out there. I don't
hear
a thing.
Just dance with me, toots.
That's exactly what it said.
Hopefully not.
they should be able to see that that's not Frankenstein, like a giant lizard
these
thing.
people didn't survive, man. He eats them.
None of them. Oh shoot,
That's what I'm saying. Is that
like there's got to be some survivors? I mean, come on. Maybe they just didn't get to the scientists in time.
oh man, this is the Jason Voorhees of giant monsters. He's gonna destroy their fun. He knew that they were gonna have sex, drugs, and rock and roll here.
I think that might be part of it, right? So Baragon comes out of the mountain, right? And much like when
much like Moses coming down
Nakajima
from the mountain.
Yeah, much like that. Yeah, when Nakajima was underneath the sand, remember, on the beach in Godzilla versus Mothra, and he just like pops up.
Yeah,
and he was actually in the suit, and he was actually buried, and then like popped up. Mm-hmm. Right? He did the same thing for the mountain as well, and I have a quote from him.
He wasn't just behind something
from the Bible.
He was in a mountain
from our Bible
a
here.
full mountain.
And he says the air was pumped through a hose.
Oh my gosh.
There was no worry about that. He said, I had confidence in it. Whatever happened, it wouldn't be my fault. The only thing was, when I got into the costume, I was all alone, so I had to fight fear, he says. I didn't have the zipper pulled down on the costume, so I couldn't get out on my own at any time. So
this man.
Yeah.
Haruo Nakajima is a man of no fear.
So he was stuck in that costume, basically, and had to just wait.
As they built the set around him?
I think they would have to build at least the part of the mountain in front of him, around him. I'm sure he was the last thing to be set before they did that. So that is kind of like really claustrophobic.
Let's add this to Haruo Nakajima's resume of just wonderful things he's done for these films to get these shots. Joe, did you fall a little bit more for Nick Adams in this film? I gotta say,
did I fall for him?
His manliness.
Oh, he's very he. I think he likes being the Western hero.
He speaks perfect Japanese in this version, the international version.
He does.
His acting, for some reason, holds so much more of a strong effect here than it did in Astro Monster. For me, I believe due to the fact that he's not a co-lead to the film. In Astro Monster, he has somebody next to him, which, not to downplay the gravity of a Japanese hero, main character, being, in conjunction, cooperation with an American hero in a film. That's great, progressive-wise. But I just didn't feel as much for Nick Adams' character. They kind of canceled each other out a little bit.
I think you're right in many aspects, yeah.
But in this film, he shines through. He's very heroic.
He does, but I also want to say that this movie's just better written. So he has
more of a chance to shine.
There's a lot more of a challenge here where they're trying to save this creature. There's a lot more complexity around this plot.
Yeah.
And there's some complexity around his character, his relationship with her, and his relationship with the other doctor.
So on screen, he's able to flesh out the character more, have more of a character.
There's also a lot less of him talking back and forth with the other guy and being like, haha, we're astronauts and it's amazing. In this one,
but it was amazing.
He's actually playing a character in a pretty tense situation. Yeah. And I think he is able to shine more. And, when he's going after the other monster or when he's going after Frankenstein to help him or whatever, and everybody's kind of holding him back and things like that, or other kind of cool little Nick Adams moments.
Yeah.
He gets to shine more because the situation is more dire and it's something more that the actor can play with. That's what I think.
Yeah. I would
so
agree.
He does do very well in this movie. Of course, we don't hear his voice at all because he's been dubbed over by a Japanese actor.
Yeah.
But
in the American theatrical release, they retained his voice, which is the only reason I want to watch that. Also, due to the fact that it has the original ending.
Okay.
So that horse scene.
We saw the horse scene. So Baragon goes and kills some
livestock.
Yeah. Oh, we forgot to mention
chickens.
The first thing we see that Baragon apparently ate was like these ladies who are working on this farm. They just go into the barn and there's just cow bones everywhere.
Yeah.
Which is a a violent image, unusually violent image for these movies.
Strong on horror in the science fiction horror.
Exactly, like just like you were saying. And we see him with like chicken feathers on his face, and crap like that.
Prior to
and then
him
we
eating those
actually
chickens.
see him take out a horse. And this horse, though, as great as this movie is, this horse is probably the worst special effect I've seen in these
And
movies.
A.G. Tsuburaya chose to keep it in. So off screen, first those ladies on the farm stumble into what, realistically it seems a little weird. They see the cow bones. Those bones are like bloodied, but they're in a building. So what did he do? Did he eat the cows then throw them back into the building?
No, maybe he was
Didn't
just
crush the building?
maybe he was just cleaning up, and he's like, I should probably
true.
put this back where I found it.
So he ate them during the night, comes back to eat the pigs and the chickens because he decides he needs another meal. Again, eating chickens, pigs happens off screen, but we see him, instead of eating it, he just kind of crushes or kicks to the side the horse, and that is shown on screen. Instead of filming a real horse for like a composite shot, blue screening in Baragon or the horse, whatever, A.G. Tsuburaya included a fake-looking puppet in the scene where Baragon tears through a farm. Tsuburaya was well aware of how unconvincing it looked, but decided not to go with a more realistic effect because the puppet horse was, in his own admission, funny. Tsuburaya was
he kept it in because it was dorky as crap.
Tsuburaya wasn't well known for his jocular approach to his films. You got to think, this is the guy who he was the only one for the Godzilla dance in Astro Monster, the cheer.
Bastard.
Does that make us an explicit podcast?
No, it doesn't.
Yeah, I didn't think so.
I said if there's
Who
more
cares?
than one F word, we have to make it an explicit.
But
This is a very cool shot, by the way. Go ahead. Keep going.
well, this is another example of the miniature set. We see. So at this point, not only are the scientists confused as to whether it's Baragon or Frankenstein that's causing this destruction, and really terrifying people because Baragon's eating people, not Frankenstein, but people don't know who it is. So the bulk of the film to the middle part of the film is back and forth. Is it Frankenstein? Is it not Frankenstein? And Frankenstein is continuing to grow, which I think, Joe, is the reason they keep showing all of these miniature sets with the actor who portrays Frankenstein in them, because you get to see him getting bigger and bigger as like the miniatures get smaller and smaller around him.
And it works. I think it looks
very well.
I think it looks very good.
So this set was in a mine partially, and then he jumps out of the mine where we see the real location with actors running around, and then the miniature so well mirrors that real
The miniature
location.
is matched
Very
perfectly.
Yes, it really is.
So it's incredible, really.
It works well for
It's
the
either
story.
that or it's a very well done composite shot, and we just don't see like the lines on the actors below.
It would have
but
been
it's one
easier
of the
to do
two.
that in the mine. Due
Either
to
way,
it being
it's
so
well
dark.
done.
Yeah, and it works well for the story and for your admiration of it beyond the story itself, where you're like, the effects work in this film.
So when the regular size actors are in there and they're like looking up the staircase or whatever,
Kind of side, yeah.
there is a shadow. So they don't show Frankenstein in that same shot. They show him after the people clear out, but they instead have this like gigantic
Shadow of a man.
shadow of Frankenstein. It's a very cool shot. It's something that we would see a lot in a Western horror movies.
It's a way of kind of
It's
making
unusual
it
here.
somewhat of an easier
It's very
effect.
cool.
Somewhat, but it's done to great effect.
Yeah.
I got to think like Tom and Jerry, where Jerry the mouse, he's actually little, but he uses his shadow to make him look large and scares
Right.
off Tom, something like that. Here's our plot driving man in plot 2.
This is
The
when you
plot
started
driving
rolling
number
your
2.
eyes.
Well, because
So stupid.
it's the only dumb part of this film, so you have to knock it a little
Besides
bit.
the horse.
I like the horse though.
Oh, I hate the horse.
Tsuburaya and his quick cuts and his wonderful use of miniatures. At this point, Joe, somewhere mid-60s, Tsuburaya Productions was founded, and he started off with things like, I don't know if Ultraman was right from the beginning, but something similar. And where they actually use Baragon, the suit for Baragon post this, is to portray a lot of different monsters in... If it wasn't Ultraman, it was a series similar to Ultraman. And so the suit Baragon was transformed or altered slightly in many different ways to portray different monsters.
Wow. So it was one size fits all suit. They
Oh,
just
yeah.
Wow, they
just like with earlier Godzilla suits where they were reusing and adding giant spines and recoloring it. Yeah. So this man goes on, plot driving man goes on in a sequence of showing him convincing journalists, not really convincing them, but trying to, that I saw something. It has to be this monster. Every one of them rejects him over and over. He goes to a journalist. He goes to a scientist in like a lab. He goes to a museum curator. He's always trying to
maybe
convince
I'm
them
totally unconvincing. My story is absolutely ridiculous.
My single, very circumspect viewing what he thought was a monster. He just gets more and more extravagant and like convinced of himself. It was a monster. I swear it was a monster. Then it becomes, it was this bioluminescent monster. Then it becomes, it just grows and grows. And he has absolutely no basis for what he is trying to convince people of. So, of course, nobody believes him. He ends up being right, though, because that's what happens in films.
So there's a couple little moments here, or little tiny bits of information as far as Adams working with the other crew.
Yeah.
That I thought were kind of cool. So one time, apparently Nick Adams signed his autograph on a picture of while working on this movie for Ishiro Honda, and it apparently said, "For Mr. Honda, the greatest director and gentleman in the world."
I know that Adams was very fond of all the Japanese cast that he worked with, both the crew behind the scenes.
He was very respectful to them. At the very least.
Yeah.
And he also said about the guy in the suit, Nakajima, he also said that he was the greatest Japanese actor. That's what he said.
Well,
which I think is it's high praise. And it's very nice. Adams is obviously a very nice man, at least it seems like.
Adams' credit, he would have definitely seen behind the scenes what Haruo Nakajima went through. Oh, man.
Well, and the fact that not Hironobu, the fact that Nakajima has to portray these creatures and has to have something to project with, despite being covered by 6 inches of rubber suit that doesn't move that well, frankly.
Yeah,
I mean,
doesn't give
the
him a
challenge of that and what he does with the challenge, whether or not it's successful or not.
He attempts. Great attempt.
What he attempts to do, I think, would be hard for anybody who would consider themselves an actor to do. Is to you have to act.
Create a character
and show emotion and
you're not shown at all. Really?
Now you have to do that all in this giant rubber suit. Something similar like to a sports mascot, only a much more intense level.
Oh yeah, because this is put on film. A sports mascot can go out night after night, and it's never.
And they can just kind of clap and go, "Yay!"
Do some dances, some handstands.
Hopefully, the head is even more intense than that is, which is.
Yeah, I really respect and admire the fact that he attempted to portray different characteristics of different animals through each creature. He kind of would, as
try to bring some realism to it, right?
Yeah, like with Godzilla, at least in the original, he was looking at elephants and the way they walked for their heft and their the movement that they can achieve. Then with this one, and the fact that he was in Rodan looking at birds and trying to mimic that, which he couldn't do at all apparently under the suit, but great, valiant, wonderful attempts, shows so much dedication to his craft. They're actually on an actual location, the actors here, as this is kind of their final searching for.
This is definitely not
Frankenstein.
So they're out in a forest right now, and obviously there's fog everywhere, which was.
It looks like the forest in Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
Honestly,
where they meet the Knights of Ni.
Yeah, it kind of does, because it's just sort of a. I don't know.
A very foggy forest.
Yeah, very foggy and very green forest.
And their choice of attire to go out into this forest, it's all white suit coats, white shirts,
tan, khaki,
very light colors. And
very
of course they don't
explorer-y. Only they don't have the explorer hats. Though.
Joe, that zoom in. Yeah. That zoom in squint that they do over and over.
Oh my god, dude. So
the camera's pulled out, they squint, zooms in.
I love the late 60s and early 70s because they had the balls to zoom.
They were willing to experiment.
All right. And some people, especially film people, they put they would stick their nose up in the air whenever someone suggests any zoom whatsoever. They're like, we only dolly here. How dare you zoom?
So uncinematic.
Yeah, it's so stupid. And it's like, come on, haven't you seen like an awesome Bruce Lee movie or this when he's like, there's a thing over there, and then the camera zooms in just a bit.
Yeah.
Just a bit.
As he's pointing.
And it's, to me, it's like alive and visceral and interesting. And very reminiscent of its time.
Yes.
Much like reverb is from music from the 1980s.
Okay.
But I love it. I absolutely love zooms.
As you said, a product of the time that hasn't made its way into the current era of filmmaking due to the fact, probably, what we suspect is the snobbiness. Yeah.
Well, there's a snobbiness there, and there's a snobbiness with cinematographers. So when a director
wants a zoom,
a cinematographer's like, well, zoom lenses aren't actually as clear as prime lenses are. Prime lenses are when they have a fixed size. So whether or not they're wide or a telephoto or anything in between, like the 18 millimeter to a 55 millimeter to 120 millimeter or like a 200 millimeter.
Let's get technical here. Go on.
I'm trying to. So a zoom lens lets you go from one in between into the next one, basically. So you can go from something sort of wide to a telephoto lens. So that's when you're zooming in, basically. Now, most lenses that they use for films and most, professional photographers, they know what each lens size does, and they want a certain size of lens. Yeah. Usually it's like 18 is probably the widest used wide lens, and then it goes 18, there's 25, and there's like a 30 millimeter, then there's a 50 millimeter, which is usually what people use for faces.
I'm going to remember this all.
And I'm sure you are. And it goes up from there, basically, up until the point where you're like doing super telephoto stuff and you want to get a good picture of the moon or something like that.
For scientific research.
But those lenses, those prime lenses, are clearer lenses in general. And so they're just, they produce a higher quality image. Zoom lenses don't. They're because of possibly how like the complexity of the mechanisms within them, the quality of the glass is lowered. And so some cinematographers, because of that, don't like the way that zoom lenses mess with their image.
I was going to say, as you zoom, don't you have to adjust the focus as well? Or because the focus on your subject kind of changes slightly?
Depends on how big the zoom is. But honestly, I don't know. The only zoom lens I have is like 18 to 55 millimeters, so you don't have to adjust the focus on that.
So to get to the film here for a moment, Baragon is being attacked by the humans, man. Isn't that crazy that they try to fight Baragon with these flares?
Yeah. And of course we have our regular, I'm running away from the monster, so I must trip now. Thing that our actress does, and then she faints.
I'm really glad that this doesn't exist in modern cinema. The fainting woman.
Does it not?
The helpless woman, unfortunately, could still exist because you just ever see helpless men. It's okay as a plot point, but when it's an overused, it's kind of terrible. Yeah. Nick Adams runs in to save her. She almost gets eaten by Baragon because we're confirmed that Baragon does eat people. Frankenstein swoops in at the last possible moment. Second. Yeah, that's a ability of Baragon, is that he can jump insane distances.
All right. So
he can jump distances. He's a burrowing creature. That's how he escaped extinction, is through burrowing.
If you're not watching this thoroughly awesome movie, so Baragon and Frankenstein finally
begun their fight at the end of the film.
And their fight, he goes to save basically the only person who's ever loved him. He goes to save her by fighting Baragon. And at one moment, they're both standing kind of really far away from each other, and then Baragon like super jumps towards him, and he gets out of the way of it. He's very awesome moment.
He's got to have like rocket legs simply due to the fact that he's like a burrowing creature. Heat beam. That's also what Baragon has. That's what's being projected from his mouth. You got to think like Cyclops from X-Men, like his heat ray, his heat vision.
Yeah. I just sort of think it's a lot like the atomic breath.
Yeah, they just keep calling it a heat beam as I look up stuff about him. I can't believe we went this far without mentioning Baragon's ears.
Yeah, they're kind of dopey looking.
I love them, though. I wouldn't call them dopey simply due to the fact that the fact that it shows emotion in the creature. Like you were saying, he's in a big rubber suit, Haruo Nakajima, all the time. So it's very hard for him to show emotion, yet it's portrayed through ears. When the ears are folded back, he's a little bit more, calm. When he's like very anxious, you have those ears that are like upright and, like all aware. Okay, you're talking about that miniature set worked very well into the fight here because one of the main characters, of course, he is subjected to karma here because he wanted to kill Frankenstein. Of the 3 lead scientists, it's the Japanese one that reveals at the end he wanted to kill Frankenstein. So Sueko and Nick Adams' character are against it. He tries to blind Frankenstein with these flares in order to, subdue him, capture him, kill him, save the heart.
Well, obviously, the other guy who saw Baragon is proven right in that moment.
Yeah. Well, it just seems so weird in the place of the story that
he's totally right. Maybe I should actually help this thing.
That's a great shot that Frankenstein, you get to see underneath, like a very low angle shot of Frankenstein just barely being lit. And he is like framed where there's 2 giant trees beside him. He looks down at the characters at his feet. And I guess we're seeing a POV of the characters up at the Frankenstein at that point. And even though that one scientist wanted to kill him, Frankenstein saves him. And it's just so sentimental.
It's a good moment there.
Yeah, tender.
Something that we just kind of moved past was that these 2 other characters, Nick Adams and the girl, they're driving along, and then they see feet, like in a POV shot.
Yeah.
They see feet coming out of, like, gigantic feet of Frankenstein coming out of the trees, and the camera is dollying forward, and it's like a composite shot.
Yeah.
It's a very modern looking shot. It looks great.
Effects work. Can't praise it enough here. We also didn't mention...
I can mention his googly eyes, though, right?
Yeah, in further iterations in the next era of Godzilla films, of course, in Baragon, portrayal of Baragon, his eyes are replaced with small, beady black dots, so he's a little freakier looking.
Okay.
And instead of just being like an animal...
It's a little cartoony in this one.
Yeah, big googly eyes, It seems like around this time as well, in portrayals of Godzilla and the builds of the suits, they were going with googly eyes, which is unfortunate. It didn't.
They don't stand up to close-ups.
Nope, not at all.
No.
Baragon's trying to go into this village where Nick Adams and the scientists were escaping to. He's going to feed because, of course, that's what he wanted to do to Sueko.
There's food over there. Well, what I'm wondering is where the freak was Baragon this entire time? So he's like under the ocean.
Okay, he was awoken by the drilling of the oil drilling that was just offshore. Destroys those oil rigs.
He's suddenly hungry.
Yeah. I mean, after all this time, what I want to say, Joe, all speculation as a fan, he's underground feeding on Meganulon, perhaps? Just like Rodan would have been,
Sure.
Because who knows what he's feeding on underground, surviving all these eons underground. Then he decides to pop up because he's just disturbed. And it's very fortunate. You said digger, right?
Digger, yeah. Yes, I said digger. D-I-double-G-er. Digger.
Frankenstein and Baragon are fighting here. And we're going to get more into the building of a forest set as a miniature when we get to War of the Gargantuans, just because it's insane. What they have to do is each individual tree, air quotes, is a branch or a set of branches that they, the effects work people hand select to look like a miniature of a larger tree. They have to plant each individual tree, again, air quotes, because for use of the actors, like the Frankenstein monster here, they don't know in any given scene where he's going to be, what trees he's going to choose to uproot. So they have to
all
have roots. They all have to be able to be uprooted so that they can look real for the scene if he's going to use it to fight. So the level of work that would have had to go into this. One thing that I wish they would have done in more monster fights where we're not in a city, I like city fights, but when they're not in a city, such as in the case of both Ghidorah, the three-headed monster film, and Astro Monster, when they're fighting, they're just in a quarry. There isn't trees.
There isn't really scale to it.
Yeah, all you see is they just throw boulders.
Yeah.
We've seen a lot of rock throwing between monsters.
Yeah, a lot of tripping on boulders from Godzilla recently.
They really vary in this film. Frankenstein throws some rocks. Frankenstein throws some trees. Here, he's shown to be intelligent enough to go to his cave where he had fire. So, he's progressing in his human.
Basically a gigantic caveman.
Exactly, especially with his loincloth animal skin garb. But he runs away from Baragon, smart enough to have a weapon, grab the fire sticks and fight him. He's just got him in a chokehold. Oh, and we didn't even mention Baragon's glowing horn.
Yeah, I don't know
which I don't know if that makes an appearance in the later films.
Bioluminescence, right?
Yeah, something like that. Overall, Joe, what do you think of the Baragon design?
I think he's something in between like Godzilla and a dog. So
mixed with a little bit of Anguirus.
Every time one of these creatures looks dog-like, I don't like them.
Really?
Just in general,
For me, King Caesar didn't work in its dogginess, but I
it's
really
like Godzilla
like
and
Baragon.
King Caesar had a baby.
That's true.
Yeah.
A little hairier too, so maybe you got some Frankenstein genes mixed in there to create King Caesar. He certainly has Baragon's ears. Oh, he's got Baragon's ears.
Anyway, I mentioned he looked like a Pokemon.
Of all of this era and possibly all eras of Godzilla films, he's the most Pokemon monster.
He looks like Nidoran. That's what Nidorino. Okay, all right.
Middle evolution.
That's kind of what he looks like. So I can't remember if it was the cinematographer or one of the people who worked on the effects, but I read that they really were not satisfied with this fight. What? And the reason they weren't satisfied with this fight, or that they had extreme issues with filming this fight, is because being in a forest, they couldn't really get the sense of scale that they wanted to get. Although I think it works very well, and so I don't understand what they were complaining about.
I can just imagine. I've been in forests. I've seen forests. I can imagine very large trees, and these trees, as miniatures, look extremely large, and the monsters tower above them.
And him chucking the trees and stuff like that.
Yeah, just uprooting so many trees. I love also that aside from that very first Baragon jumping at Frankenstein, it's all done slowed down. Thank goodness, because that's when you get the heft of the movement, the weight that their big monsters have to slowly move. Even when it's sped up to the point where they're fighting and it's fast paced, you have to feel the weight behind their movements, and that's achieved through slowing it down. So thank you for slowing it down, because otherwise it looks comical.
Something I also read that I don't really understand too much is they tried in this fight especially, knowing that this actor is, of course, Japanese and he's supposed to be European.
Caucasian.
Knowing that,
Caucasian.
They actually tried to film him in different ways so that he would look more Caucasian. And that was that they would put filters on their lenses on the camera to make his skin, I guess, the right tone. Which,
wow,
I'm not sure if they ended up using that or if that was just something they tested. But they certainly thought about it, and I don't really think it works because he obviously looks very Japanese.
You got to do more than change the skin tone. You got to change the whole facial structure of the actor, and that's not happening. Not through all the makeup in the world.
Well, it's also like the how his hair kind of looks and how his chest kind of looks. There's there's differences.
Yeah, and ethnicities, of course.
I don't know.
I don't want to get nitpicky, and I really wouldn't if they didn't keep saying
Caucasian. If they were like, oh yeah, and he's European.
If it was once a throwaway line, it's astonishing to have found a Caucasian boy. And yet they just keep saying it.
It's just like, well, he's got a big eye, he's got a big brow, right? So that's the Caucasian thing.
I think it's just in science fiction verse, whether Toho or just all of science fiction universe, I think that Caucasians just are able to absorb radiation. You got to think Attack of the 50-Foot Woman. I don't know how she comes to be, but, perhaps it's through atomic radiation. Certainly ants and like them in the movie Them, they grow. You have crabs in other American films growing. Baragon's drilling is shown to a great degree here, where he escapes from a Frankenstein through a mountain by drilling through it at very fast pace, comes up at the top of the mountain, and you get to see rocks spewing everywhere as he pops his head up out of the mountain. It seems like Frankenstein just hopped up to the top of the mountain, though, so Baragon really didn't escape at all.
So one of the things that I find especially beautiful about this sequence is, of course, the part of the forest is accidentally lit on fire by Frankenstein when he's throwing the on fire branches at Baragon.
Whole trees, yes.
Yeah. Suddenly, like, the fire begins to be like this element in this fight that is lighting the scene. So what we see a lot is, in the beginning, they were just fighting in the forest, but then the fire starts to happen. The fire starts to grow, and so it's like adding this complication to this fight. And then the color palette doesn't just become like the foresty greens and the blue of the night sky.
It's red,
but it's also like this red is adding to a visual dimension of the movie that you don't get anything quite that flamboyant or interesting in any other part of this movie, but
or many of these films.
This movie,
when it becomes a fight,
has especially good cinematography, but it is like this section of the movie is where it really shines. It's its work with color and everything like that. What's up?
What has shown up, Joe?
What do you?
A giant octopus.
So Frankenstein defeats Baragon, and then this is probably the part of the movie where besides the horse, where I'm just like, okay, well, the movie was actually over, but we'll suddenly just have a random giant octopus come and attack.
I want to say this sound effect suffices to portray the tone. Suddenly, there's a big octopus here.
I mean, the octopus does look really good.
It looks much better than the King Kong versus Godzilla octopus, which is where the inspiration for this is drawn from.
Yeah, so they just decided that they wanted to add a King Kong versus Godzilla octopus fight just randomly after the Baragon fight.
The American backers for this film, not the co-production crew, which was AIP or something like that, but the American backers, UPA. Thank you. AIP were the people who distributed it in America. The American backers saw the octopus fight scene in King Kong versus Godzilla, the one near the beginning, and they were stunned. They loved it. They were just in a awe and shock. I'm losing it, Joe.
Shock and
awe of what they saw on screen in that King Kong versus the octopus, he has a name, but I don't know what it is, fight. They wanted that reproduced in this film. After it was filmed, and really, like Joe said, the effect of the octopus is great in this one. He looks like an octopus, and
he does look really great.
Well animated.
The little tentacles as they're kind of like fighting Frankenstein. I have not seen a string yet. Of course, we are watching this on DVD and not on Blu-ray, but I have not seen a string, and it is extreme. It's just extremely well done.
Henry Saperstein and the American
the monster
producers
looks really good. Like, they did a really good
job. It looks
like
an octopus. They saw this, didn't want it in the film, felt it was too abrupt. Ishiro Honda didn't want it in the film, too abrupt.
Too abrupt?
So in the original theatrical releasings of both the Japanese and the American versions, this was not included. The alternate ending, as it's called nowadays, of this octopus fighting, not included. due to the fact that it was just didn't fit, didn't mesh at all in the storyline.
It doesn't. It really doesn't.
Because where did it come from? It just showed up. Many fans for years wondered about it, though, because stills of this fight, even though it was never shown in theaters, showed up in Monsters in Filmland magazine, in trade magazines. It was touted as, sometimes it was called Frankenstein versus the Devilfish, and these screenshots were shown, never to be shown in theaters, though. So, a couple years later down the road, in Japan, this film was being aired on television. They accidentally used the film reel with this alternate ending on it, and fans of the film were shocked because they saw an ending that they didn't see in theaters, that they didn't remember. So, of course, then interviews were done with Ishiro Honda, questions and posed to him. He said that actually there was even more endings shot for this film, many of which have never surfaced, likely will never ever surface. This was just one of many. And so what they saw in theaters, what we didn't see here, Joe, how they actually ended it in theaters, and the original releases of it is Frankenstein defeats Baragon. They both fall into the earth under like an earthquake. I would assume that Baragon had tunneled under the earth and they just fall down through the earth.
Interesting. Yeah, that would be a better...
In this ending, the octopus drags Frankenstein under the water, and we see the usual ending to one of these films where it's just done in water. Yep. You don't know who
pretty much. So I'm
survived.
Not sure. Yeah, so the movie's officially over for
at
us.
This point.
I'm just not sure, if we have the Japanese edition with the original ending or not, because of the nature of this DVD.
The fact that it has 3 versions included on 2 discs for the DVD.
Okay, so we probably do have it somewhere, but
if we ended up watching, which I don't think we need to really, the Frankenstein Conquers the World, so the American version, it's going to have Nick Adams' voice. It's anywhere between 2 to 5 minutes shorter, has the original ending of them falling through the ground, and the third kind of difference that I heard, Joe, I don't know if they included it, but what the producers wanted, either the backers or the producers, but again, I don't know if they included it. They wanted scenes throughout the film to show Frankenstein being more violent. They wanted him to be more violent, bloodthirsty. So I don't know if they included that, but they wanted a scarier Frankenstein than what was portrayed in the Japanese version.
We'll probably watch it and see whether or not it condones another commentary or not.
All right. In any case, I really want to hear Nick Adams' voice. He was cool in Astro Monster.
Yeah, and if it's not enough to
warrant a
whole new podcast, it doesn't matter. We'll tell you what we thought on the end of the next episode. But
what would come after this is going to be Atragon if we don't end up doing Frankenstein.
Are we watching Atragon?
Because it has Manda in it, who's going to show up and destroy all monsters.
Okay.
Joe, as a last fact, really quick here, because we were wondering why the German releasings of Godzilla films from this era, they always feature Frankenstein in the title.
Right.
As it's Godzilla. So, dude, this film was very...
Frankenstein!
Wow, that really didn't sound like you said Frankenstein.
Frankenstein.
Yeah.
Wait, how do you say it, Drew?
I don't know. That is the German pronunciation.
Frankenstein?
Frankenstein. Due to the success of this film in Germany, German distributors started calling most subsequent Toho kaiju films, especially Godzilla films, Frankenstein. They would slap the title on there. I don't know if in the film they call Godzilla Frankenstein, but very often they would say the origin of the monsters as being monsters created by Dr. Frankenstein. So in other words, it just became a major selling point.
That's really interesting.
And
I wanted to
all came from this
continue
film.
That over there.
Oh yeah, Shin Godzilla gets released there.
Frankenstein.
That's good, Joe.
Yeah.
Which really Shin means new birth, resurrect God, so many. Oh, what they?
I think is it new? I don't know.
There's many meanings to Shin.
Okay.
But yeah, that was the last of our facts. That was the end of the film. Where are we at, Joe?
I thought it was a fantastic movie. I think it's one of the best kaiju movies I've seen. It has some flaws in it, obviously. And I haven't seen the Japanese theatrical cut, so if they had a better ending, then definitely it's an even better movie than what I saw. There was some convoluted, kind of stupid plot points. If you're right, it's weak. It's a weak
I want to
point.
say one. Like, that was one weak point.
Yeah. But it's kind of a strong
overall, the drama portrayed between our three main characters, especially coming to a climax at the end where he wants to kill Frankenstein and the other two still want to save him.
Yeah.
They've like went through a journey with Frankenstein. Yeah. They want him to survive. And he still, die hard to the end, knows that for the good of mankind, we have to kill him.
Also, probably my favorite monster battle,
I want to say ever up to this point.
Up to this point, yeah.
Because sadly, raids, we were hyped for a battle between Anguirus and Frankenstein. Kind of a letdown. He kills him really quick.
Well, I know the one against the alien creature in Godzilla 2000 is a very good one, and I'm excited to get back to that one.
Yeah.
You know,
up to this point,
ever
monster
get to that
fights. It was well lit and well choreographed.
It was. The element of fire was just, it's so well shot.
Comparable to the choreography in this up to this point, the only one I can say would be King Kong versus Godzilla. It seems like watching the fight, they took time to choreograph what they were going to do instead of just slapping it together.
Right. I'll have to agree with you on that. So Drew, if you guys could get this, I would highly recommend this movie.
It's going to cost you a lot for legit copies. It's going to be Region 1.
Maybe we should just make a distribution company and just figure this out. You got like $10,000 for?
Yeah, exactly. Start mass producing these. Be a little on the shady side, like good old Sumo Gorilla.
Well, the thing is, then we would have to, like, let's say we got the rights to Frankenstein Conquers the World. We would then have to sue Sumo Gorilla. So, would it be a bit like?
I think we would
double-edged sword.
I think we would really piss off fans of these movies if we sued Sumo Gorilla.
Yeah,
I think that's the only thing keeping them afloat is the fandom, just being like, keep doing this illegal thing, keep doing this illegal thing.
I honestly think it's just a guy who's burning stuff in his basement every once in a while when someone orders a thing.
The absolute mass appeal of Sumo Gorilla is the ease of getting things that are out of distribution and for a low price comparatively. $13 compared to over $50. Can't beat it, man. Same exact copy.
Well, it's hard to get a hold of these movies. I like, part of me is split because I'm like, well, it's
pirated.
Especially this one. This one
is the absolute most suspect of all of them. Where we're like,
it's an American region DVD. It's not a Japanese region DVD, which
our moral qualms aside, we have it. We watched it.
And we're going to are we going to give this copy away, Drew?
Well, I want to keep this film, but
you want to keep this one?
Let's give it away.
Okay. Well, no, if you want to keep it, then keep it. But we got to give away a kaiju movie a month now.
Have we hit that point?
I think we have. I'm gonna check our thing.
Okay. I don't think we have though, Joe. I think we're very close to it.
We haven't?
Nah. Well, we're almost to, Joe.
Okay. Well, real quick,
shout out.
Just a shout out. Look, one of these Pactors has chosen, at least for this episode, to give a much larger chunk of money than I would ever give. So I want to.
That being said, Joe, you are a poor college student.
Yeah, I'm almost done. I'm almost graduated.
Go, Joe.
But
go, Joe.
So I'm gonna thank each one of these patrons. I think we named one patron last time, and now we have 5.
Thank you so much.
You. So we got, and I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your names. I love you dearly, however it's pronounced, okay? Max Pacheco, thank you very much. Anthony Catton, thank you very much.
You're great to talk to on Twitter. Thank you, Anthony. All the luck in the world to complete in your collection.
Ayame Chiba, thank you very much. Jason Poor, thank you. And Chris Jappert, who we now owe a sit-down episode to at some point. Thank you very much. So we actually owe some kaiju stickers to 2 people, which you have not yet designed. And it's okay, guys. We have your email and your address and everything here with our Patreon manager. So what that means is even if you stop supporting the show, like if you have financial troubles or whatever, once we get those kaiju stickers figured out, we will still send them to you whether or not you are
Still donating at that level.
It doesn't matter. And I want you guys to know that we've had the same thing with Ultimate Final Fantasy, my other show, where like people were giving for a while. We were behind on like giving them their stuff back, and then we still sent it to them because look, they supported us for at least one time or 1 month in that case.
Yes, in this case it's per commentary.
In this case it is per commentary, so keep that in mind.
Always, if you at least one time donate to that reward tier, a custom made kaiju sticker, or with Chris Jabbert, ding 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 ding, our big winner, he's going to talk to us sometime on the podcast.
So we've got to figure out
stick to that if you pay for it at least once.
When we can call him on Skype and we can do a non-commentary episode with him. That'd be cool.
I'm excited for that.
I'm excited to talk to some kaiju fans.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway, guys, thank you so much for your willingness to donate. If you also want to support the show, you can go to patreon.com/the Godzilla Podcast, or it's Godzilla Podcast. I'm not sure.
If you Google Godzilla Podcast.
Oh, it's Godzilla Podcast. So patreon.com/Godzilla Podcast, or you can go to GodzillaPodcast.com. There's a Patreon link there. There's a PayPal link, and then there's an Amazon link that you can click through. Buy your stuff, and whatever you buy, we get a small kickback from, and it costs you nothing. So thank you to those who have supported the show. The show at 1 episode per month is almost paying for itself. So,
Joe, we do owe the Patreon donors something, though.
We do.
A Rift Tracks version of Gigantus the Fire Monster.
We are giving away one kaiju movie per month as well. True.
Are you sure? At what level?
We are. So Gigantus the Fire Monster Rift Tracks commentary only for Patreon donors.
Yep. Patreon exclusive content.
That's going to happen. And me and Drew have to figure that out.
We will. I've never purposely written jokes, so that's going to be interesting.
Between now and last time we had an episode, which was like a month ago.
Oh, we did.
We also reached our $25 goal, which means if we have 2 episodes done during the month, which is sometimes happens and sometimes doesn't, obviously.
Yeah. At this point, it should.
At this point, it should, yes, because I'm living back down in the valley with Drew. So it's a little easier to get these things done.
Joe,
this time we're going to be giving from our own collections.
Frankenstein Conquers the World. Let's do it.
Okay. All right. So we got to give that to a Patreon donor. Okay. Drew has a drawing app, like a name drawing app.
I can already tell this is going to be really exciting, Joe, to do each podcast.
Are you ready?
Out of the 4 contestants who get a free kaiju movie per month, starting with Frankenstein Conquers the World. Yes, you have a free chance per month.
Free kaiju movie
we
per
have
month.
Anthony Catton, Ayami Chiba, Chris Jabbert, and Jason Poor, and the winner is Chris Jabbert.
Hey, Chris Jabbert.
Our big money donor. Not in any way influenced by that factor. He was just a random generated name. And you are going to be on a podcast with us, a non-commentary podcast. We're going to talk to you, and we're going to send you Frankenstein Conquers the World. So please get in contact with us. Oh, do we have his address, Joe?
We have his address.
All right, we're just going to send that to you.
It's part of Patreon.
So congratulations, Chris, on winning your own copy of Frankenstein Conquers the World.
Dude.
Let's,
woo! This is pretty cool, actually.
Yeah, Joe.
We might have to watch our thing first before we send it to you, but
so it will be at least a week because we got to watch the American version.
It'll probably be about a week or 2. So.
Oh yes, because if we decide to do a commentary on it, we have to have it to be able to.
If we decide to, we'll see.
If there's enough of a difference. But, Joe, the next reward tier that they're going to get to...
That is for the month of December, right there.
The next reward tier that they could possibly get to, we're getting that Zone Fighter.
Okay, yeah. So what happens is if we get to a certain level, the show is going to be paid for, and our thing...
The reward tiers for Patreon donors
is
for combined Patreon donors, not individual.
Is that we're going to be doing commentaries over the Zone Fighter series, which was a series created with Eiji Tsuburaya's studio, right?
Yeah, and
on television, and it does feature Godzilla in it.
Okay,
and
great.
So
I'm excited.
No
subtitles.
There's no English subtitles, so
we're gonna have to get the context
from. We're probably gonna watch like 4 episodes at a time or something and talk over those.
That will be Patreon exclusive, so
that'll be awesome. So
if you feel like contributing to that, don't make Chris Chappert make this realization possible. Come on, let's get. And all you have to do, a bare minimum, is donate $2 per commentary.
It's $2 for the Patreon exclusive stuff. I don't actually think that's a Patreon exclusive reward. The Riff Tracks is.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
The Riff Tracks is.
Well, that's great to know. I didn't even know that.
But the all that has to happen is enough people have to donate, and then we'll do those commentaries as well.
Okay, and we're very close. I think it's like $35.
There's even a Gamera one later on, which it's a far-reaching goal. But
if we achieve it, we're going to get more kaiju goodness in here for you, up in you. So I think that was it, actually. There were no reviews this week. We do...
No reviews. It's okay. We got Patreon donors. That's very cool.
Yeah. If you submit a review on iTunes, though, or through our contact page on GodzillaPodcast.com's Geekdom Entertainment, all that, just Google Godzilla Podcast, and it's up there. I think it's the second link.
If you can spell the word Godzilla and podcast and .com, you can do this.
You're eligible to win. I announced it very briefly last time. I haven't received it yet, but a Mechagodzilla figure, which we'll be giving away within the next few commentaries. So that's still open.
Those are to iTunes reviewers.
Yeah. Or through our contact page. Anybody who gives us a review anywhere, it helps us in our rankings, and we appreciate it. We thank you. I'm very tired, and I believe that's the end of this, Joe.
Okay. All right. We'll wrap it up. We'll see you guys next time.
Keep it G.